It's actually
but I mean, it was just like parallel life experience 15 years ago.
like dance quiz for people like for health, you know, that's some information.
And then
like this sort of like real life having a conversation and continue like that's sort of in vogue right now, and I think it's awesome that like environment. So I was sent this along, I feel like read them myself, but like how this has that sort of like but I don't know that we like MR isn't trying to like interview magazines markets their stuff in a specific way to even though what they're doing may not be that different actually from the type of interviews but they're talking about them in a way that has like this hear this awesome and like Susie doesn't do that and maybe doesn't want to do that, but if they did it might have something.
We should really control how our community is represented by the way that we're writing from an internal standpoint. So that it's consumed by, I just think the more it can be represented in that way, the more likely it is come across to people who are unfamiliar with it, and how
I think it's I think CC does have it in terms of academic following, just using a meeting. Had taken part of dance parties I introduced CC as you're not able to know CC like the entire thing. You're very nice. But so I feel like that actually is already responding to. You know, we're thinking about pride and also trying to I wonder though how's that conversation? I do think that this is one there's like this chance for crossover. You may go to a dance office and you want to do this interview for the dance program, and you're looking at these images and that's really, so you just kind of encourage everybody to and I don't think because of the nature of movement research is mission, what we're trying to do, we're not going to be able to this publication. I just wonder how students do. I know when I was there, they also like, it's just an interview with the because it's connected to this community. And then all of a sudden, it's the interview. So they're always like, oh, I want to know.
Sorry, you can go first.
I think, but on the other hand, I think that correspondence is actually very accessible. No, I like correspondence. There's one that you are really somehow dance studies. That one of the writing was like so much that I kind of went to the correspondence and had written first because I needed something more like refreshing to, like easier to, and also, I mean, I found out about it in intern and like but then I kept going back to it after time, and I think also that like being a web-based publication is a really, really powerful thing in the time that we're in. And I kind of sadly, and I haven't met honestly like such a powerful part of our experience right now. And I think that part of like getting it out there is recognizing the social media space and like know a lot of artists and stuff like that is consumable and like productive and like learning like just not bullshit. But I also think that it's this incredible way to balance. I mean, even this like stupid thing over the dress that was in the dumbest, most innocent. We don't use this. It was just like this stupid picture about it's dumb and it's like it's seductive, but like also really I mean, I think about that is really powerful. So I feel like there's something like a collaborative method of like getting everything out there without sort of like getting lost or but
Great. I mean, like on the topic of Asian design, product, this question of to what extent correspondence research, you know, what is research review and these that follow website, like how much are these publications that reinforcing commission values specifically in research being something that is produced by like more light and then that treats like brand. And that is like so brand is that's the kind of thing if you want to go into space that kind of potentially degrades that's not quite the word, but how this publication is perceived, ways to see writing channels. And maybe there's a space for acceptance of more modifiable ways of circulating or branding identity of something without actually compromising the writing or the commitment to like the length and going deeper into these things. And I feel like in general, downtown dance doesn't skirt around the internet and presence on the internet. Like so few dancers and even a lot of people making work don't have websites or online presence. So there is almost this culture of taboo around that. And I wonder if that does kind of like play into a decision to not explore more how to capitalize on the assets of the internet and not just off as like facsimile or pop culturally or super self-aggrandizing social media-y, but maybe addressing that, like I wonder if that's kind of underlying the de facto keeping correspondence as a page on the website. It's a bad thing.
It's like
someone did some work, spends money on space, so as like they like I think I don't know if it's a mental thing, but I kind of or it's like I can work Facebook thing. Yeah, I was like,
I cooked some a meal for my website last year. Because I luckily knew someone who was a
I'm just like responding to topic. I also think that artists are looking at but they do are interested in things like branding inside publicly. So I think it's also important for to reflect this research are just sort of like sort of like punching purists like broader and there are there's artists that are also drifting into dances and sort of looking at artist surgery as a much more complex than so there's certain things that can let go of, they have this like hand or mind music. And it's just interesting. I think our design organization, this is that people can talk about dance in 1,000 different ways and what's really just
when I'm reading things where I'm trying to research something that has across the million things about like I mean, I don't know that I've ever seen like one thing that like filters or like
It can be redacted.
We're not listening. Are we?
I was just gonna say that, but I mean, I don't know. I've learned how to do basic, really basic HTML to make my website and stuff, and I also run a kind of fake journal on a fake website that I run, which I learned how to do HTML. But I think also the internet is this like fake but real space where you can actually do whatever you want. It's like an expensive piece of nothing that like you can invest $10 a month in and have almost that thing that you can personally learn how to ship and create. So in that way, I mean, like, it's interesting, expensive Western expansion piece of go to, without actually kind of out of context that we kind of have like the ability to country out of context.
Some quick questions. Do you think that correspondence interviews would be interesting in print, like if there was a book or like if they published somehow?
Especially for like research and like longevity. But
Right. I mean, that question is also coming from Moriah Evans. Like, I don't know. Yeah. I know,
regardless of the extent to which people want to buy that and read that, its existence potentially does create visibility for the online platform. Like maybe the function of creating conversion is actually just to get people to read online.
Yeah. Yes, come in, welcome. We're asking the group discussion. And then meets Moriah. She doesn't want the PJ to be online because she wants she like wants to like not say her experience and the greatly expanded design possibilities. You know, so there's also this like fetish thing that like, you know, for just thinking about that kind of thing, like keep making it hard to find. Like, there's something about circulation research that needs to be archaic and keep people out. I don't know if that's right, but
If I can jump in there, I don't know how you either, but there's not so much, my perspective on PJ in particular, is it's not so much that it's but like that's laying there for 6 months. And for the publication cycle, it's like twice a year. So it's just laying around for 6 months. Whereas like things that are online, you see them right away, but then the next thing happens and it's off the front page. Whereas this thing, like, I don't know if anyone reads it, but people say they do. So like you have that time after you were going to figure it out because it's there. It's like it's in your space. You don't have to go out and find it. Like we're saying, who goes out to find it? But it's in your face all the time. So something that's physically present in your space is going to allow you a different kind of interaction, which is not better or worse than offline. It's different. Like if we want to put something in the journal, we don't want to put something in the journal that's only interesting to look at for a week. It's going to be there for 6 months. We look for content that is useful to think about over the life of 6 months, hopefully after, but at least for 6 months. Whereas, if we're thinking about putting something online, we want it to be really important right now, and not necessarily think about it's important 6 months.
this is something to move into the group discussion. So I'm sorry. We can keep having the same discussion. It's time to move into group discussion.
I'm here to assist I'm not looking. Keep this in a circle a little bit. Let's do it.
Keep an eye on our friend here.
We should close this gap. Tell me about bringing this up. Like that.
Yeah, maybe I'll. So great
All right. Okay, guys. have a half an hour until they close the elevator. Now we can all reconvene. How would it be if we each went around and just gave a couple of points that came up from our conversations? And I certainly don't want to, everybody else who is in the groups, of course, add in and insert what is missing, but maybe just get it rolling. Yeah, so maybe before, I don't know if you guys all told your groups what we were all talking about. Circulation, design, content. Yeah.
Who's going to be better down? What are people? What? What are we reading about dance in the content? Why do we read about dance in other publications? Is it to understand how other people are reading about dance, even though maybe we get better information from publications like these, or they're more kind of rich in content or experiential knowledge? A lot of people in our generation are just talking about other artists, and our good circulation report about content. But there's a strong academic calling for CC, and I think we're trying to figure out how to then circulate CC in channels that are sexy. You know, kind of like how do you like ping, like we can link to other people's publications on CC, but how do we get CC ping to other people's places, and then like Interview Magazine was an example that I brought up as a kind of a site that has really sexy packaging, but the content is very rich, and it's control artists like talking about the work. I think that's where I'm going to stop.
Sure. Yeah. Let's do design. Content is design. So we were designed. We know who we were. All right. All right. I guess our discussion centered in two ways. One, we talked about the objects of the journal itself, and what's good about it, meaning that it really produces a bodily experience of reading. It's temporal. It's cumbersome to navigate. It's not clear. Although there's like a structure that exists that's reproduced itself, it doesn't feel that way when it's read. And there's a lot of photos. It's great. All right, so we talked about that, but we talked about the question of the cover artist strategy over salary content. Some feedback was that the white paper on the cover, as well as in the center fold, is not very appealing. It's kind of ugly, and it would be wonderful if the journal could not fall apart when it's read. It's very hard to like keep track of the pages. There was a proposal that perhaps was the idea of a guest designship could be an interesting strategy for the future, and maybe also CC. A guest designship, like in the way that the journal used to have rotating editors, and CC does have rotating editors. I mean, we could also open that up to design as well, the visual sections. And have sections, like the way that an actual newspaper has sections, you can take out the art section. So we could really actually extract the cover art's portfolio from other content. Or all the interviews could be consolidated in one portfolio, and then all the. Sorry if it got a little PJ specific, but we did get into CC's territory and particularly the conceptual debate about whether or not it's good to go online and or not good, but the imperative of the online
online content makes itself accessible, and that we are sort of in our publications to be rare, and I would argue sometimes precious work around documenting the voices of the larger experimental performance community. Who actually can access that information? And Macklin saying that he uses CC a lot as a, sorry if I'm not articulating well, but is a consolidated body of information that he goes to get stuff. And that the PJ, look, it's harder to find things with. And the experience of being accessible is not at all the same. You have to have more curiosity and investment in the experience of finding information. So what is the question? What is the role of loss in the experience of print publication versus the role of distribution that exists in presence? And how the hegemony of online discourse. Or the potential for the hegemony through the online. Allowing the Google machine or wherever to find kind of experience.
Which, depending on your content, could be like a
He's saying it's useful.
Yeah,
we did say it was useful.
No, and then
We said, but maybe there's another thing.
And then the PJ is also perhaps it's useful. It's essentially useful because it's not that, and it's not participating in the structures.
Yeah.
And in an interesting way.
Was it hegemonic or was it homogenized or was it both?
Both. Both of those terms are correct.
But I mean,
But we didn't come in that time at all.
That's the next week.
but Buck was making a great point about the PJ, like this whole week wrote about like laying there. Do you want to say that again?
So I was saying that,
Back to circulation.
Well,
the PJ is there. So in terms of online content, one thing is that it comes at you very quickly and very easily. But then the next thing comes and it moves down the page, and like within a short period of time, that thing is not present for you. It's still accessible, but it's not present. Whereas the PJ in particular, because of the publication cycle twice a year, each issue lays there for 6 months. So you encounter it physically. So even if you are not incentivized to read through the whole thing as soon as you get it, over time you run into it enough times that it is in some ways forces you to engage with the content in a different way than online, which can come at you very quickly, but can also run out of your perspective in a shorter period of time.
That's a great point, because that was something that came up in our conversation, but in a different way. That's really different between the online and the physical. And it was specifically about, okay, well, what about the possibility for these kind of quick arguments and certain controversies to be expressed online, right? Like all of a sudden, this whole argument on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, that can happen on that platform, but versus we were talking about PDR, for example, that sometimes one of the essays has been sitting in the office for 2 years, and it's about a performance. So maybe it's this question of presence or presentness or whatever. Like that definitely came up for us in terms of content. Also, we had this, because we're talking about CC, started off about talking about interviews. People are interested in interviews, and a little bit, it sort of does come back to that, thinking about CC as producing a kind of archive of artists talking about their work. This question of, is it artists talking about their work, or is it, this sort of constellation of figures, critic, amateur, curator, scholar, that it working messes up, We did talk a little bit around content versus like, this is what I want to talk, we need to talk about, dance injury prevention, or you know what I mean? So, whatever, you know. So we didn't get specific like that, but we're about to. I think we're about to. That would have been the virtual half an hour that did happen. Okay, so then there, you know, but going back to the online, we're sort of like, okay, the hyper-urgent versus Gawker kind of model. Things happening really immediate. Everything's covered. It's hot. It's on there. Done. Whereas, you know, is that something we need to discuss? This question of contextualizing maybe work or contextualizing these interviews or this, you know, these conversations, contextualizing them, but then also like situating critically. Criticality, are we talking about, is it always a negative? Is it a challenge? Or is it always what is our relationship as dancers or dance makers to producing these texts, and is it about nurturing necessarily?
Nurturing
the work or the artist. Is it taking, you know, I kind of come back to, you know, do we take the artist statement? And what's the ethical, you know, the ethics around that? Are we gonna sort of be challenging to, is the work is a challenge, the writing is a challenge? How does that happen? This question of, okay, well, what do we, okay, so I started off with this, you know, question, okay, well, what's missing? What are gaps? What do we not have? You know, and then I think we turned into this conversation about, well, what do I actually read? And do I read it? What kind of reading? Is it skimming? Can we have a filter? Can there just be like a listserv or like a newsletter that everyone gets? And it's like, here's the index of everything that's been published this month in dance writing. You know, that kind of like master listserv thing. Or, you know, this, you know, are we oversaturated? Do I actually read the stuff? Maybe I read philosophy, maybe I read architecture, maybe I read the New Yorker instead. Maybe I don't read about dance. And then I tried to prepare, okay, going back. Then also this question of like, how does one produce writing or text if one isn't a writer, talking about artist writing? And then also we can sort of flip that, how does one approach dance if one isn't a dancer? You know, kind of brings up that conversation. And then going forward again, fast forward. So this sort of conversation about, okay, what's missing? So what about, you know, we're all engaged in the field somehow in the spectrum of dance and publish. You don't have to read it, but you know it's got to be there. It needs to be there, and it's not. That question, which I still am like, please email me. I still want to get answers about that. So we kind of just forget into that.
Can you reframe?
Okay, so well, it started. You know, the first was ask you about the gaps or what's missing or what we should, you know, sort of continue to develop, invest in. Brought up immediately that, okay, well, what do I actually read? You know, and then maybe it's not that, and it's not dance writing. But then, okay, well, what we're invested in this field, you know, and we can think about that. However, that's demarcated. It's totally fine to have lots of versions of that. But within one's idea of what that field is, or what to be robust, you know, what needs to be there. You don't have to read it, but you just know it's there. So that's a good concept. So, piggyback. Let's piggyback.
What's that? Did you?
That was the radiator.
I mean, I think I just, you know, one of the things that you're talking about in that is that like CC is a very vulnerable publication in the sense that we have the interviews that we think up every month and or can coordinate or get people to respond to and edit on their own and are spending their own interviews as like a whole, you know, person psychology, you know, and it's beautiful. Like there's a lot of things about it, but then like we get what we get for content, and then the other thing is we have this byline of like proposed critical and interesting projects about dance to us, and we don't publish reviews, we don't publish like, you know, people advertising their projects, and so whatever we accept becomes the publication. So it's just, it's a very kind of like you know, it's like it has such a thin membrane, you know, right? So I just urge everyone who's here, like, propose writing projects to us, please, one, two, like, I think, personally, I'm in this place will not be able to really know how to direct content because I'm not interested in only what I'm interested in, you know, and I think how do we get more people absorb more content and like so it's more and it's like Facebook or something. Because the PJ has like, history and it's happens like various issues that's debated on the floor of the Congress and it has all this great stuff going on, but the you see it's like it's just an online publication. It's like what's the strategy for doing this voice and I think like everyone here like, part of that, you know.
I think how do you right now decide what the
I mean, it's really like,
We haven't had a lot. I mean, really, it is, it's not reviews or, it's just like how.
Where is it available? Because the PJ is available.
On the internet.
I mean, also it's not a statement. That might explain that.
It's on the movement research website.
Right. That's yeah, that's like came up in circulation. It's a great point.
Yeah, sure. Just like the question of potentially the relationship between the mission of movement research and of correspondence, and to what extent is a sort of autonomous publication with its own agenda, and then by keeping it as a web page on the movement research website, how does that reinforce a relationship to movement research as a broader organization, and to what extent is correspondence sort of an agent of movement research versus something that does have autonomy and its own agenda, the kind of discourse that it's creating, and then by being housed in the MR website, how does that affect who's getting to it and who's reaching it?
Like something about correspondence, I feel like it has this weird like almost as an object on the internet in a way that like something like hyperallergic feels like a very solid platform in a way that is partly due to the nebulousness of correspondence, but there's a like it doesn't have a shape separate from movement research, which makes it feel, and then it comes out of it like comes that month at a time. And again, I'm like, okay, there's an email of correspondence, and now I know it fits. Like, remember that it fits. And so it has this feeling like it's not, even though it is an online platform, and whatever, and that sort of like constant flow of keeping up with the times in dance, or like what's happening in dance. It has a very different purpose, but it's strangely, but it like secretly has a similar platform to that, just because online has that sort of. So I don't know. There's just some questions there about what does it mean to have a platform that is online and feels almost, but at the same time feels almost like an object that arrives that, but that also doesn't have a separate like just aesthetically or whatever, like formally, like it doesn't have its own look, yeah, I mean, and that's what it is, but that also like is in a certain way similar to the PJ or something that has a duration to it. Like it has, it's like here's an interview that's conducted. It's not like this is a little like 3-paragraph news flash about So what is that? What is it to have that sort of?
Not just like what does the whole correspondence desire? Because if it's like this.
Well, I mean, what is it is not a.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is that it is constantly changing. Right. Like that's what I'm hearing. Is like it's the form of it is that it's got a rolling editorship thing. And so then, if that's the case, its desires are constantly redefined by every year of editors that comes in. So like, what's stopping it from just being totally redefined every year? If that's the construct of it, is that like we like these three editors in, and they totally kind of launch from the last thing and say like, what hasn't done at Broadway? I want to take a minute with this, let people read and change the history with it and broaden and narrow its focus.
I think it's what we're doing right now is that having a year to figure out how to be an editor of an online platform is not enough time to about that and figure out if that's right or if that's holding us back or how it should be. I mean, I think what it desires, it's driven by what the editors are interested in or stumble across or what to do.
Really having a workshop. I mean, I think about it as having things that before I got involved in it. So I'm sort of trying to understand what that is, acknowledge it, and then also see what the potential for expansion or I don't know, rupture, outside of that. I mean, it's definitely the conversation interview model is like really a big part of the correspondence. I guess words right there. What is
I was going to say, like, I wonder, I think of the title of great, and I've always wondered if that thing, like it's true. I've always wondered about the space between the title and then Terry O'Connor. I'm worried. I don't know. Worried about what that means. I don't know. Yeah, I guess, and then you're right. As I was saying, okay, it's correspondence. Is it critical? And then what is critical? What does that mean? Well, what's I suppose I think the critical is the non-parochial in relationship to parochial, but
it's weird because we're sort of setting up these conversations where people are setting them up, teaching two people, and there's sort of like the conversation format versus the interview format, and like one person being focused on somehow maybe more than you know what I mean? So it sort of does become this question of like, okay, well, who's going to be the agent of that of producing that criticality, and who's going to put themselves in, and then it's very much like this person in conversation with this person, the name, the authorship is a really big function. Is that, I don't know, it's also just finding those figures, and then also artists that want to just be in the room for that and have it published. I mean, I don't know, I think that the question that we've had in content, around criticism, the sort of question of challenge or, I guess, how can we, I mean, there's always this sort of concept of how can we create criticism so it's a way to really positive rather than negative,
do you think that could be like more, so let's say two people are interviewing each other, or like once and like arguments. In the beginning, it was like maybe someone was having a show and someone would interview them around that. But do you think that there's like a possibility of another strategy where that other people would have a conversation about those two people? Like, who is Terry O'Connor? And why does he do what he does? So that like, then we, I don't know, like many, I don't know how, but like there's a wider discussion around the two people by many people, and then that could turn it into gossip. But I'm just getting critical. I'm critical gossip.
Dialogues.
Yeah. Yeah, it's when I have it so that everyone becomes very, very contextualized and more deeply understood. And then if, let's say, someone talks about someone and then 10 years later, another person, you could start to understand how that person's logic was seen more widely and also give it What's up, Levi?
Sorry, I think the analogy that the elevator stops working at 8 o'clock, so. If people need the elevator.
That's a good time. Let's look it up.
Correspondence inherits a certain kind of politics from the research as an organization because we and I think that there is this idea of reviews, reviews in the dance world is I think a lot of where I locate critiquing if I'm not satisfied with the critique that happens there, like a criticality is sort of relegated to those places.
And the correspondence about like unearthing voices and sort of like, not firing arrows at them, at the emerge. But I think like how can CC do more of how can you do more dynamic kind of thing that gets passed around the web and then the content is like a short
It's about
seven people talking about her.
yeah, like that's a, but yeah.
One of the things I also really like to about Sam, you talked about earlier, in relation to PJ and CC, which is the field of patient is not something you can walk into and use to express your voice without going through a really deep learning curve, understanding how it functions, how the design transmits the ideas, all of that. So it's like when the PJ is going under this sort of continual editor cycling, it didn't seem tenable. The learning curve was too high. It's like you spend 6 months on a journal and you learned, you start to learn, you're starting to learn how to make publication. You're in the very beginning steps of that. So it's, we're talking right now with people about stretching the editorship of CC so that it can become hopefully more conducive and hopefully being able to use it as a vehicle for your voice or your voice. The tricky thing is that everything takes time. Desire is being translated to such a how do we foster these support bonds? Is a big question.
I like that question of what does critical correspondence desire to do?
Yeah.
And all speak for it.
Depends on the question on the French theory.
It's actually.
What is your object?
For what it's worth, I thought the critical, I interpreted the critical as necessary.
I was thinking of critical when I got involved with haircut dialogues. I was thinking of critical as also thinking about how one can embed what's happening in the dance world and other discourses of other media. Not that that's not happening, but that this could be a platform for that kind of. It's sort of getting on the same page and kind of breaking through the hermeticism of dance in a way. Just really kind of art criticism, critical art theory has got such a long history, and dance critical theory is just it's a bit newer. So it's interesting. It's nice to have a platform for it.
It's kind of ironic then that it's housed or hermeticized within a very dance specific organization in the online world. So if you're speaking to the dehumanization of dance and getting it in conversation with other forms, that then we keep it as a page on a website for an organization is so dance specific and whose audience I perceive to be very dance specific and very not full dance world specific as an observation.
It wasn't originally a page on our website. Like I keep thinking about historically, it was criticalcorrespondence.org. And it's really interesting to bring it up. I hadn't thought about that. And the shift, I think, was just largely functional at the time. Like it was like we wrote a website, we had a chance to like go through the process, and we just kind of built as much as we could with the designer. And I've never really considered the ramifications of brand perception from that shift, the fact that that lineage isn't known, or and certainly that site was disastrous, so I'm glad we don't have it. But yeah, it's really, I'm really interested in that point of that, because it did start that way.
You started as a paper.
No, it was an online publication, but it was its own domain. It didn't, the name of it was not tied to movement research, so you wouldn't find it through that portal. You found it as its own port. If you are looking for movement research, I don't know how many aren't. 2009, I think, some research site. Yeah.
That's it.
critical correspondence desire. I wonder, like, who's the audience and who's the audience that you want to get? And are you trying to like grow the audience? It seems like I definitely think there's a place for having something that's like dance and choreographically focused, but I don't think all the content should be necessarily dance choreographic focused. Like maybe there's a way to include other artists because dance and choreography is art. So I don't know, I mean, I don't know how people would find critical correspondence if they weren't like interested specifically in dance.
Well, and movement research programs too. That's the way a lot of people find it, is through looking on the website or something else. You know, if they don't already know that.
And it's an interesting question because I feel like this, the question of permits, which is a bigger, much bigger question. I feel like in a lot of ways, when research actually has a really expansive fluid definition of what dance is.
Say that again.
I think when research has a very fluid and expansive definition of what dance is versus, say, dance NYC. It's a different kind of expansion. That's like we're going to learn the lineage, the history of the form, the multiplicity of aesthetic iterations and audiences. Whereas when research is sort of honoring a kind of more specific legacy, but also a legacy that's maybe less tied to like strictly roots and findings. So I think the publication tends to reflect that. It's also going to reflect the editors who.
That still is also the research still has a specific audience that's like, I don't know, I think it's mostly like dance focused, but like a little bit of a broader definition of some other things, but like
Sure.
a painter might not necessarily,
Right.
for people who are interested in painting might not necessarily. But a painterly interested audience would go to hyperallergic or like want to subscribe to that.
We talked about like Ball and for example, as places where distance can go across.
But they also do like completely different structural models.
Totally.
Like, I mean,
Totally.
MR, which does a lot of things, all this, we're just a side project. We're just one of many tangents of MR, or whatever, tentacles. So,
You're not.
and MR publishing is just one branch.
I also think it's okay that it's a concentration. I feel like there's a lot of writing about art. I think it's totally beautiful that we are on our feet figuring out. And I've been in a lot of, I can make you imagine, great discussion about like visual arts and dance. But one of the weird ones that I had with Philip Byard and Ralph Lemon about acquisition and stuff. And I don't know but that I think that one of the interesting things that came out of that discussion was that in a way, this is right, we don't know quite what we're doing yet, in a way, in terms of like, how do we want this discussion to be better place? Let it be ours as it moves on the field. So this is amazing and great because as our discussion about what bodies do and what dance is and what our critical understanding of dance history is in our bodies and in our writing and online, let us understand it as it starts to interface. You know, not to be hermetic, but I don't think we have to seek public share necessarily. I feel like that can come naturally. I think what we're doing is trying to understand how to do what we're doing. And I think that's what's good about this meeting in a certain way, like why that's is that there's a funny cusp moment where there's a lot of talk about this kind of integration. And I don't know, let's be ready. Let's really know how we want to discuss what we're doing. And have our own model of discussion and our own way of like understanding what's criticality for us, what's the bundle for us, what is it for us? I don't know. I think it's not necessarily we can borrow, think about useful other models, but I think we, right here in this room and in research and with the correspondence is where we can actually make models that are completely born of these interests. So we can think about cellularly, like from us, really by different brain and then in representation. I don't think that exists, and I think we're going to also be thinking about that at a high level, at a high level, not like, so I don't know, I'd say let's not rush, but let's keep on discussing this situation.
Yeah, there's always been a really cool transparency element to CC. I enjoy for CC. There's a lot of wanting to fight. So I'm biased in my evaluation of the whole mechanism, but to have kind of an insight view to conversations between Juliana May and Sarah Julie, who are managing her finances, and seeing how is that relationship parsing itself out, and what biases is she coming to with that conversation? Things like that on the side of feeling impactful and will only be valuable to people in this field in that way, but kind of having that transparent access to it in the same way that getting 7 people to talk about over that happened 10 years ago, honoring that distance too, the intimacy and distance, both aspects are so valuable about it, and that's a lot of insider talk, but it's
Inside.
I was going to say that we get a lot of insights and judges because regularly and of the open insight and they're not strictly speaking, I mean, typically performance, theater and already it's not the focus. Not so hermetic.
Well, I think that's what Biba is suggesting, and our human research has a really extensive idea of considered.
But I wonder if we could I just wonder if in the platform, I think those conversations can still be whatever CC wants them to be, and it can still be these very specific, very long, whatever conversations. But the platform, for instance, I told Will about when Performa first started their magazine, they used Tumblr, and it reached a really massive amount of people who otherwise would never arrive on they would never otherwise arrive on Performa's magazine and read the type of discourse they were writing. But Tumblr as a platform is really democratic, and you can tag things and it can reach people that are just looking at hashtag art of the tag. And so I wonder if using a platform using a platform that is democratic in a way, that has a way of accessing people beyond this room could do that work for us without trying to play with people. Just sort of, as a sort of add-on, as an accessibility plug. And I don't know if it does anything to diminish what we're doing.
But they find out, we don't find out.
Exactly. We're not trying to play to them, but hey, if they find us through a tag, then someone in, some country far away that would otherwise never read CC, and that's powerful. That's the power of the internet. They don't know that we're capitalizing on it.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about the numbers we have in a long time in technology here. Our your platform for sure.
Who reads the PJ?
PJ?
Yeah. No, you actually read it, or you just look at it.
Sorry, I don't know what else you were talking about. Syndrome though is that's a big thing about contributing your audience, right? You want to cast whatever critical correspondence is doing or the PJ or whatever on the internet. You want to cast it as part of art history. You just have to hashtag it and it'll appeal to people who are I want to look up art history today and I'll see everything that was tap that. And
But why should, I don't know, should we really accept these models? I mean, I don't know in terms of like the liquidity of consumption of information, like the surface nature of like the digital era, all these things that like in some ways dance can resist and does resist, and advocates for other ways of being together, bringing people together in space and time, like all this way in which the values that make art forms, that are art forms, like the types of values are art forms.
It doesn't necessarily have to change the content, it's just how you're.
But that's like that's marketing.
These are important questions.
I mean, I'm not saying you're on a question, I'm just saying like,
It's the whole, like, I mean, it's virtual, you know, like, that's, I mean, we could sit there and talk to a person who was like designing websites in the mid-80s and like got their whole perspective on what it means to have a web presence and what all of that whole range, you know. But I think web presence is really important if it is a web site, how we're dealing with all of these things, you know, and whether it is going to be one school and kind of like, oh, a website has its own form of art or whatever, which people also are dealing with all the time. What's internet art?
I don't want
questions.
sorry for interrupting.
But I think that having the performance journal as a temporal object in your picture that falls apart is there, I mean, Jeff Miller, and is also valuable. Like I think like meaning in the web, like to continue to make that as a research body of understanding is, we can't, I feel like it's very important because I myself, I feel like it's not the body, right? So then, critical correspondence, that like I feel like the two things are very complementary. But in that way, like, I don't think it's
sometimes, for example, we do have there are not that, in terms of what we actually cover information-wise, it's not, like, I'm sorry, but I feel like I get annoyed if culture covers, like, someone that I want to feature or something. It's so cute. No, but it's very embarrassing. Yeah, like, don't me, just don't me. But, so, I mean, I feel like the net is not huge. Like, now we're talking about world events. I mean, hello, we could be talking about, like, real shit going on where, like, bodies dying in political warfare and economic warfare. Like, you know, we're at war, United States, hello. Like, I mean, we're not talking about that stuff. Like, we aren't that political. And I don't feel like, and something that's interesting, this is kind of but when people talk about art in the 90s and, like, the DJ and its origin and all this, that era, it was a really, and performance in those times was very much just sort of performance of politics. And I kind of think we've moved 2015, I don't necessarily think that's in the air as much. There's a lot of thoughts and theories and the act of publishing.
And like what politics means.
Yeah, it's shifted a lot. So, okay, where am I going? I really don't know. But I still think sometimes we cover the same artists, for example, but are we covering them from different angles? Not. Meaning, I'm really talking about 60.
But I think that goes back to Bob's comment, honestly. You can receive that information really, really related to
Channels.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter. I think honestly, it's important. And in fact, both are so full. Yeah. Must be weird. I'm not looking for longer.
The other thing that I would throw out that really points to, but I think that also, you know, what is in the room right now is CC and PJ, but that's not all that exists in terms of dance, right? Actually, there's also TR right there.
And Turbo Community there. And the New York Times. That's nice.
So like what's on the table is CC and performance journal, and I think that what Sarah said is like really great. We can, whatever these things are, they can be small in the sense of narrow. They don't have to do everything all the time because there are other things that we can go to do other things also. And already exists in these publications that do work. They're not so narrow. they have.
I think that's a good place to finish.
Is there, you had one thing you want to say?
I was just gonna say that it's important to have as many as possible. It's important that you're covering things. I'm not a full spot. They're not gonna talk about it the same way that they're talking about it.
Well done, Alex. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I really do want to.